Folks, it's now 4 o'clock and this is very loud, isn't it? Okay. Huh? Because I can't. Oh, not me. All right, so I think we're ready to call the Legal Committee meeting of January 28th, 2021 to order, please. If we could have the roll call.
Okay, Counselor Stubbs.
Here.
Counselor Peterson.
Here.
Counselor Perry. Counselor Foster.
Present.
Okay, Counselor Perry, are you on? Okay. He may not be joining us. He's out of town, but he may be able to get on at some point. So right now, Counselor Perry's absent, but we do have a quorum, so we'll continue with an approval of the agenda. And we do have an addendum, which is listed here on its cover sheet as item 9. I would like to move it up under item 3 if no one has an objection and would make a motion to that effect.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. I finally got in. It took about 6 tries, and I finally got it to accept all the information. So I'm going to put myself on mute, and I'll join in as needed.
Okay, thank you, Counselor Perry. So Counselor Perry is present. So all 4 are in attendance through GoToMeeting. Thank you. Okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion
Thank you.
to approve the agenda with moving the citing ordinance, which is listed as 9, to 3A.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda with that one change of moving item 9 up under number 3. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. We have the minutes from the December 17th regular legal committee. Are there any questions or concerns on that? Okay, hearing none, they'll stand approved as written unless there's an objection. Okay, hearing none, we'll go now to our regular items. First on our agenda is 5 airport leases. Mr. Stark.
Afternoon, councilors. First up on the list for the airport leases is a lease to Ascent Aviation Services for Building 100. This would be a new lease. There's a typo in the financial consideration section for the dates. They're actually March 1st this year to February 28th of next year. It is correct on the lease. Building 100 consists of 5,520 square feet, and they want to lease the building for the purpose of a mechanic shop and equipment storage as they're building their new hangar on our airport. The monthly rent would be $1,600 a month, $19,200 annually. That comes out to just a little bit less than $4 a square foot. And stand for questions.
Are there any questions of Mr. Stark on Ascent Aviation? Okay, hearing none.
Madam Chair?
Yes, sir. Counselor Perry.
How many boots on the ground are we expecting for this current portion here on this contract?
I didn't hear the question.
How many employees?
For this contract, really none. This is just going to be a footprint for them, a place to put things while their building is being built. There'll be folks in and out, but nobody here permanent at this point.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Counselor Perry?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, can I have a motion, please, on Ascent Aviation?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to send to the consent agenda for the February full city council, to recommend approval to authorize Ascent Aviation to lease building 100 for $1,600 monthly and $1,920 annually, with all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Counselor Peterson seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving to recommend Ascent Aviation Services lease on the consent agenda at the February council meeting, please signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, Counselor Perry. Any opposed? Same sign? Okay, this unanimously approved to go on the consent agenda with our recommendation to approve. Thank you. Next.
Next is a lease to Larry Parker. Mr. Parker has been in space T-Hangar 120 Space 2 for a while with Don Mays and Angel Mays. The Mays have completely sold out the airplane to Larry, so now he'll be this is sort of a new but renewal type. He'll be the sole name on the lease. Consists of 1,002 square feet. The monthly rent would be $200 a month, $2,400 annually. Another one-year lease from March 1st to February 28, 22.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Mr. Stark? So this is not an addendum, right?
No.
Good. And was this lease terminating on February 28th anyway?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So he's already in the current lease that terminates
Right.
on the 28th.
Okay. Okay, but this is actually a new lease because the two are no longer on it.
Correct.
Good. Okay. Any further questions or comments? Could I have a motion, please, on Larry Parker?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to place on consent agenda consideration for recommending approval to authorize Larry Parker, an individual, to enter into a new lease agreement on T-Hangar 120 for $200 monthly, $2,400 annually, with all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on Larry Parker's lease. Any further discussion? Hearing none then, all in favor of recommending this go on the consent agenda with our approval, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none then, the motion passes unanimously. Our third lease is with Scott Burnett, also on a T-Hangar.
Correct. That's T-Hangar 120 Space 4. This is a new lease. That T-Hangar consists of 1,175 square feet. The rent amount is $205 per month, or $2,460 annually. Also one-year lease beginning March of this year.
Okay. Any questions or comments on Scott Burnett? Hearing none then, do we have a motion?
Not yet. Madam Chair, I'd like
Thank
to
you.
make a motion to place on consent agenda to consider recommending approval to authorize Scott Burnett, an individual, to enter into a new lease agreement on T-Hangar 120 Space 4 for $205 monthly or $2,460 annually, with all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval of Scott Burnett's lease. Any further discussion or comments? Hearing none then, all those in favor of recommending approval on Scott Burnett's lease on the consent agenda in February, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously then. Thank you. One more in a T-Hangar, Clayton Hightower, please.
Correct. Clayton Hightower is requesting to lease Hangar 120, Space 6. It also is a 1,002 square foot hangar. Rent amount $200 per month, $2,400 annually for a one-year lease beginning March 1st.
Thank you.
And it is a new lease if I didn't say that.
But it says here. So I'm curious, Scott, one that says new is not really new, but we have 3 in the new ones in the T hangar. Have those hangars been vacated or?
We had 2 that were empty. We still have 1 more that's empty, but the door's not working correctly, so we need to work on that before we get it. We had 2 that were empty for a little while, and so they just came along more or less at the same time. One was David Partain's, and he's deceased, so we had to take a little time to get his stuff out of there.
I see.
But then once he was cleared, it was immediately available and immediately leased.
Okay. Do we still have a waiting list of some kind on
We do
T
not.
hangars? Do not. Okay. Thank you.
When we did the property management document and put a $10 fee per year on there, it took the non-serious people off. And turns out we had a lot of those.
Okay. Now we know.
Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on Mr. Hightower? Could I get a motion, please?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to place on the consent agenda for the February full city council meeting to consider recommending approval to authorize Clayton Hightower, an individual, to enter into a new lease agreement on T Hangar 120 Space 6 for the amount of $200 monthly and $2,400 annually, with all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to recommend approval to council on Clayton Hightower. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of putting this on the consent agenda for February's meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Hearing none, it's approved unanimously. Thank you. Now we have Eastern New Mexico University Roswell's request.
Eastern New Mexico rents what's left of the old runway 1735 pavement over at the old municipal airport to do CDL training, and they've been leasing since February of 2012. So this is a renewal of that lease until such time that we need that property back to develop it. But that lease would be another one-year lease at $134 a month, $1,608 annually. And that would be a 3% increase.
3%. Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on Eastern's lease at the old municipal airport? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to place on the consent agenda for the February full city council meeting to consider recommending approval to authorize Eastern New Mexico University Roswell to renew their current lease agreement on the use of the area of the land at the old municipal airport, with the rent amount being $134 monthly or $1,608 annually, with all other terms and conditions of the lease.
Thank you.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This one, Scott, does not fall under our desire to increase these every year because it's not at the Air Center.
Right, it's not at the Air Center, and we do increase it every year, but typically we do 3%. And the fact that it's a land lease, it's always going to be cheap.
Sure.
We do nothing for maintenance out there on it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor of recommending approval on the consent agenda for the February council meeting of Eastern New Mexico University Roswell's lease at the old municipal airport, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously then. Thank you. Thank you, Scott.
Welcome.
Okay, next we'll go to item number, I don't know what number, Wayfinding agreement. And I just saw, yes, Ms. Jennings come in. Thank you. I'm sorry to
Good
not let you even sit down.
No, it's okay. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'm here today to present the contract for RFP 20008 that was awarded to Groundwork Studio. This would be the wayfinding proposal for Phase 2 initiative for the city of Roswell. The contract is in the amount of $65,000 plus tax, and the reason bringing it forth is because it does go above the $60,000 threshold, so it does need full council approval, even though you guys did approve the RFP. So I will stand for any questions. Just an overview of what this wayfinding phase would include is primarily for public parking in our downtown district, bus stop transportations throughout the city, as well as some additional entrance wayfinding for some of our cultural activities, which include Cielo Grande Recreation Complex, the Spring River Zoo, and then the Roswell Museum and Art Center. And I'll stand for any questions.
Okay. Any members of the committee have any questions of Ms. Jennings on this agreement? I do.
Sure.
On the first page of the agreement under terms, and this is just a little typo, but it makes a difference. This agreement may therefore be renewed for up to an additional 1-year term. Is that still, it's just 1 year?
Yes, so the way that I would like to build this out is to do the project in specific phases. So my goal is each fiscal year, we would take a next step or next phase of the project awarded to Groundwork Studio. The original RFP had a variety of tasks and scope of service. Unfortunately, due to where our current budget is and to not ask the council for additional resources, that is why that is built in that way.
Okay, I appreciate it. And then just one other question. Forgive me if I'm supposed to be in the loop. Under 9 of the agreement, which is on page 22 of our packet, it says the terms of the agreement are contingent upon specific appropriations from the legislature. So they're paying, I mean, we're using legislative money for the signage? No, I didn't think so.
No, I can jump in there. That is my fault. It should say City of Roswell.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, okay. Okay, so you're just going to change the language, or legislature of New Mexico. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. Yeah. And the scope of, under Exhibit A, scope of work, this is all to be done this first year. This is the scope for the first year, or do you expect them to complete all of this in 12 months?
We don't expect them to complete all of that in 12 months. We hope that they will start with the initial task 1 of utilizing some of the existing plans that we have, and then moving into the development of incorporating the old wayfinding plan into this new design and implementation of the 3 major categories, which includes public parking, bus transportation, and then the, I would call them their signature wayfinding of our cultural assets, which includes the Spring River Zoo, and the Roswell Museum and Art Center, as well as Cielo Grande Sports Complex.
Okay. So, okay. So you've listed everything, but not expecting it all to be actually done in the first year. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
That's fine. And then that may be it. Are there any other questions or comments on this proposed agreement?
I've got one.
Counselor Stubb.
Oh,
Yes, please. Counselor Perry.
Just right below that, in the F portion there, it talks about the producing a preliminary, talks about the graphic layout, fonts, that kind of thing. Will that branding just go to staff for approval, or will that be coming back to council?
As far as the design, I'm more than happy to bring it back to the council and to have council included in the conversations of the designs in the subcommittees, like internal conversations. But I don't think necessarily the design has come before the council. I don't know, I wasn't part of the initial wayfinding plan, but I'm more than happy to have council input, and I welcome that.
Okay. So
And,
Counselor Perry,
Madam Chair,
yes,
on that, you know, the wayfinding, there's been so many things. We've been at the wayfinding, working on it since 2009, 2010. So there's been several different attempts at things. So I'm just, I guess, a little bit in the shadows as to exactly where we are on some of the design stuff, and I'll count that up as my fault, not staff's, because they've always been very welcoming for me to come and get any information that I want. So I will update myself, educate myself from there. But I think since we're dealing with, especially with the new company here, considerations of finalizing should maybe be brought back to the committee or something for looked at.
okay.
acceptable.
I don't believe that needs to be in the motion, but Ms. Jennings
No,
is
Madam Chair, I
nodding
won't
yes,
know either,
so,
as long as it's an understanding.
okay, thank you. Any other comments or concerns about this?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Counselor
Okay,
Foster.
the 65,000 is just paying for the design and their aspect and placement. That's not, I mean, because here says they
That-
will provide 80 signs, but it does, and then they'll charge us for those 80 signs?
Correct, yes. And the reason we don't have a cost for the 80 signs right now is because we don't know what kind of materials will be utilized with the design. At that time, I'm hoping by the end, I would say, of May, beginning, I will have actual costs for some of the initial phase, and then I can build that into fiscal year's 22 budget, and to give you guys a little bit more information on that. But
And-
right now, if I were to give you a number, it would just be a guess, and I didn't want to do that.
Well, and I think that's where it goes back to approving the design would also be approving the costs. And so that's where I guess I do think it should come back to
Okay,
at least one of the committees to
Sure.
do that, because now we're talking dollars and cents, not just aesthetics.
okay. So it needs to come back anyway after a year. So we'd hope sooner than that if a design is ready to present to council. So, thank you. Any other comments on this agreement? Okay. Then can I have a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to place on the consent agenda to consider recommending approval of the wayfinding signage consultant services agreement with Groundwork Studios for the amount of 65,000. Did I say placed on the consent agenda?
Yes.
You did.
Okay. So-
Second.
Okay, I'm going to just ask you if you feel you might need to, in your motion, include the 4 exhibits. I think they're for A, B, C, and D.
I believe so, yes.
Is that how many there are?
Yeah, there's a scope of work, the
Yeah.
proposal, the cost plan, and then the insurance.
Right, the insurances, yes. Would you mind doing that?
I
Incorporating that?
actually, I said the services agreement, so that covers all of it. Does it not? I can.
Not necessarily.
Well, it's what.
Including,
Is,
okay,
I'm just saying, I could read the whole agreement too, but I just think that in saying the service consulting agreement, that I am making, so.
okay. So the motion is to approve the agreement, to recommend approval on the consent agenda of the agreement for the wayfinding signage. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Counselor Perry?
just foreseeing potential concerns with this item because of the amount, I think that it may would behoove the committee for us to just place this as a regular item on the agenda.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
That's an amendment?
Yeah.
Okay. Will the seconder agree to that amendment? Saying on the regular agenda as opposed to the consent agenda? Yes, okay. So, I guess we have to vote on the amendment?
I think there's unanimous consent at this point. I don't think you need a vote.
Thank you, okay. So, the motion now on the floor is to send the wayfinding contract with, where am I? Wayfinding signage consultants to full council with recommendation to approve, but put it on the regular agenda. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, then all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, no. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's go to the real estate purchase agreement. Here we go. Todd's going to present this to us.
Good afternoon. Just a little refresher information on the property known as the Cozy Cowboy Cottages at 1101 North Atkinson Avenue. An appraisal date of September 10th, 2020, report of the multifamily residential property known as Cozy Cowboy Cottage. The appraised market value was $415,000. The site contains a total of approximately 1.24 acres or 54,014 square feet of land area. The improvements consist of one main residence with 3 rentable units, a guest cottage containing 1 rentable unit, storage building with a partially renovated unit, and other ancestral structures such as Rockwell House and a carport. The total gross building area is approximately 4,796, and gross living area of the subject also totals approximately 4,796 square feet. Site improvements include covered porches, concrete sidewalks, privacy fencing, and mature landscaping.
Thank you. Yes, please, Mr. Nebb.
Madam Chair, Legal Committee members, I wanted to give a little bit more background on this because we have not been able to talk about this publicly until today. When we were renovating out and improving on the zoo property, especially with the pond, you can see that directly to the north of that area, we wanted to make some improvements around the area, and so with the property owner and us, we went ahead and removed our fencing down, and we did a lot of tree cleanup on there and all of that. At that point in time, we started having a conversation and with the property owner as to whether or not there would be any interest in selling the property. And there was an interest at that time, so the city initiated an appraisal of the property. And so you can see the market value of the $415,000, which is what we did offer them, contingent upon being approved by the city council, the appraised value of $415,000. So both parties were in agreement that that would be an acceptable number. As we did take a tour of the property, I know some of you had the opportunity to go through the property as well too, because we just wanted to do our cursory checks and balances within this process. And so with that, this is the first chance that you have to look at that. I know I've had a couple conversations with other city councilors, so I wanted to go through what interests us about the property. At some point in time, with all the renovations that we've done with the pond, we believe that this area will become very usable by the city for an event or an activity area as we expand out the educational benefits of the pond. And so that's our long-term plan for this. The challenge we have is that property doesn't come up based upon our planning, our long-term planning, and so we have this opportunity now for the property. When I was speaking with one of the other city councilors about this, we are trying to expand out our property division and how we sell property, how we acquire property, how we utilize that. And we know that this property currently has those apartments that are setting on it. And one of the visions for our property division would be to establish rentals in the city where we can help assist with nurses, teachers, police officers, firefighters, in order to take some of those things out, because planting those individuals in some of our neighborhoods, we believe that is a good value. So short term, we believe that we can turn this property back around and utilize it for those types of rentals until we can get our plan together to do this property overall as an activity and event center. We don't want to remain in the rental type business, but we also believe that as we look at affordable housing, as we look at our special classes of employees that we are lacking in, nurses, teachers, police officers, firefighters, we see the value of at least in trying to help develop out methods in order to increase that. So I wasn't going to put this on staff to explain all of that background, so I'm here and I can answer any questions with this property. I know the property owner is in the audience as well too, so if you would like to speak with her, you could do that as well too. But I'm here to answer any questions on this property.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Before we go to a motion, let's see. Councilors have any questions? Councilor Foster?
Yeah. Currently, there's the 3 units are rented. Now, is there plans for the city? Would we plan on renting the main house, or?
Yeah, and as I stated, the long-term use of the property will be to convert this into an activity event center. But as they are rentable units today, we would continue to rent the spaces until we can get our plan together in order to make the full renovation. So the areas that are acceptable for rentals today would be tomorrow until we can get that plan together. I would say that, we're getting ready to go into the next budget cycle. We will be having those conversations as to how quickly we think we might be able to shift the property. But our goal would be to maintain the rentals as close as it is today. The nice thing for the city is we don't have to put up the big 10-foot chain link fence back around the property because we own the property.
The other question would be the back building in the back that's not livable right now and not, would we leave it at that, or would we look at going ahead and converting it into a rentable, livable space?
I would not want to it really depends on further conversation about advancing the whole idea of creating livable spaces for those special classes of employees. Right now, I would say that we would not want to put too much money into an unusable building. We will consider the possibility of removing that structure through our other methods, because it may be cost prohibitive to bring it up to where we need it to be, and so we'll stick with the long-term plan for that.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Councilor? Councilor Perry, any questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions that I have. I guess Joe can answer, and maybe if there's someone from the inspector's offices, code enforcement. Hey, I know that we have electric and plumbing and building inspectors that walked it as well. Have there been any discussions or indications of any concerns with continuing with rental at this time?
Are you aware of any? Okay. Madam Chair, Legal Committee, we don't believe that we had any significant concerns identified by our inspectors on the property. There are some things that we would just as the new property owners, we would make those adjustments and corrections as necessary. But I believe that as they walk through that. And I think the explanation from the property owners, they had installed some additional footings and of all that nature in order to make sure that the property remained occupiable. So at this time, I don't have any other information that would make me believe that there are any significant issues with the ability to continue renting those properties.
Okay, another thing of discussion, this being something new for us, I know you and I have spoken about this at length, but what department, whose job would it be now taking care of lease agreements or rental agreements? I know that the airport's been very familiar for years with rental agreements. I don't know what other departments have been. Under whose auspice would this be?
Yes, sir, Madam Chair, Legal Committee. As I look at the responsibility with this, it will fall underneath one of two departments, and I would expect that we will have further conversation before identifying significantly which one is going to do that. In my mind, until the City Council desires to release this property for full use of the zoo, I would place it underneath our property division under planning and zoning. We don't have another department that actually does this, so it is our property division or the department that is responsible for the property. The example I will use that is similar to that is that the Boys and Girls Club building is a part of the recreation division because the use of that building is for a service that supplements the recreational department. And so rather than to place that lease agreement underneath a property division, that's how we ended up doing that. So we have a couple other properties on 2nd Street, A.O. Smith, that's all the way out on the eastern side. That belongs underneath the property division because that property is not owned by anybody but the city. And so with this one, I would say that if we're going to go ahead and utilize the property for different rentals, I would place it underneath the property division for that maintaining it and that purpose. If we are ready to get it close enough to where we're going to release it to the zoo, we could continue those rentals underneath the zoo, but that means that we have our long-term plan in place. I hope that helps.
Yes, sir, Mr. Ned, thank you. I guess one more thing that's, I guess, more of a comment than a question. I'm willing, I think, to vote to send this on to full council. I do have some reservations after looking at the property, but knowing what we're going through right now, especially in the medical field here in Roswell, and the need for medical providers, whether those be nurses, whether those be doctors, I don't know to what suitability it would be in some of those areas, but I do think those places could be utilized and have been utilized with nurses. Also, I have spoken with some folks about students that are coming here. We're constantly trying to find good medical professionals that want to come and stay in Roswell, and I think that there's place for the city to be part of that solution. And I think this is really our first opportunity that we've had to attempt that, and maybe this can meet that need while we are developing other plans, as you and I have spoken about, with other properties to consider to try to fill a gap in an area that the city can participate in trying to bring these professionals to our city to better help our living standards. So with that, I yield.
Thank you. Councilor Peterson?
Thank you. The question is, where's this money going to come from?
This money will come from cash on hand, and so this is actually it would come out of the cash on hand out of the general fund. I don't see how, unless we were going to turn it into utility property or something, we would utilize enterprise funds. So it will come out of cash on hand on the general fund side.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of reservations about this. Buying property, you know, we're also short on money with COVID and all that mess. You know, I don't think now is the time for it. You know, a couple years ago, one of the number one things that the citizens of Roswell wanted was a the roads fixed. And I think we should use this money for if we have the money, to use it on the roads instead of purchasing property. You know, I understand why, you know, it's right there next to the pond. You know, it's probably it'd be a good area for the zoo. But at this time, I'm not going to support it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Counselor Foster.
I do have one or a couple more questions now. But there was a significant, the back wall, the rock wall from the back building had separated, and you had explained to a certain degree they'd put some pylons in to bring up the foundation, and so that would explain why a rock wall would separate. But I would see that there was going to be an immediate need to remediate that unless it's already been remediated, because the liability purpose of a rock wall falling on somebody would be too high to just let it still be, because I think it was about 4 to 5 inches separated from that wall at the top. So those repairs have to be planned for. And I can support this to go to full city council, but I would like to have kind of a cost of what it was going to cost us to fix that wall when it was presented to city council, because that's going to be an immediate cost to us. And the other question I have is, if we're pulling the money to purchase it out of cash on hand, is the money for the rent going to go back into cash on hand?
Madam Chair, Legal Committee, I'll answer that question first. But yes, wherever the money is derived from to spend on something, any money that comes back in will be returned into that same location. So if we utilize the money for maintaining the properties out of the general fund until we turn it over to the zoo proper, when it comes out of the zoo proper, then I think it opens up the other revenue sources that are associated with operating the zoo. So in this case, those money would be returned back into that fund at that point in time for that question. And I would also say thank you for the homework in order to help prepare the conversation for full city council. We will have another meeting with our inspectors about what we believe is there. I really have tried to stay away from getting too absolute, because we don't own the property, to go in there with that fine-tooth comb saying this is what we need to take care of. So we've left it at that level. We have our ideas. We'll have estimates as to what we think it'll do, what we're going to need to do. But I think with the inspection, outside of the separation from that structure, we don't believe that rock wall is in any danger of failing, I think, within that process. So, and I think that's what attracted us to the main building is that in order to use it for an event center, we're going to have to take out almost all the other walls that are not non-supporting as well too. And so the whole plan would be there. So thank you. Yes, we will prepare that accordingly for the conversation at City Council.
And I've come up with one more for you, so sorry. I know one of the reasons is the cost savings of not having to put the fence back up if we go ahead and purchase this, because we did take that 8-foot fence down. But now are we going to entail fencing that whole area off with 8-foot fencing?
No, I would say that, and I've put a little thought into this, and we will not go back with any major fencing around it. We may go back with like a split rail just to identify between the two, because if we do have renters in there, we don't want them to enter into the other area without that permission. So the goal would be to eventually maintain some type of controlled access from that end, where we can separate out the pond from the zoo proper, because they're crossed with that the creek there, the ditch area, and so we can actually do educational pieces on both sides without opening the entire facility up as well. And so at least that's the vision for what we've talked about. I would say that we will not go in with what we removed in order to clear out all the trees and everything else, was that the old chain link 10-foot fence with gaucho wire around the top so that we could keep the separation, so.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. I have a few questions. My real concern is how much value for our purposes can we really put on those buildings? Because I think a residential building, I'm assuming, can pass with different regulations or requirements than something that we intend to open to the public or use for public use. And when I went through those buildings, I could not see them used for public use. So, go ahead, if you could comment on that,
Yeah, I was
please.
going to say, Madam Chair, are you going to put that in the form of a question? But no.
I never did I?
You
Sorry.
don't need to.
As I
I
question.
think that's, that is the challenge with the way this process kind of works and how it evolved in the conversation. So, and I know I've expressed this with Councilor Perry and a couple of the other city councilors. This thing evolved very probably different than if we would have put it together a different way. And so we were working on the pond. It evolved into a conversation. We needed to remove the fence. We started working with the property owner on that. Their plans for their business had shifted, and so they had an interest in what we were asking as well too. And so that evolved into that. If the property was already up for sale, we would have went in there and done this a little bit differently as it kind of comes about. But more specifically to the comment and the question, what we are hoping that we would find in there is that we would be able to salvage some of the bones or some of the foundation pieces in order to get there. At the end of the day, if we had to clear it out, legally we're required to do an appraisal of the property, and we should be paying around that appraised value, more or less, depending on a lot of different conditions. Because I will say that the property owner, I believe they believe that there was more value in the property than what the appraised value was, based upon what all they had put into it over the years they owned it. And so we ended up with that term of the appraised value as being where both parties were at least comfortable. If we do have to change the property, I don't know, will the property be any cheaper 5 years from now, 10 years from now? My crystal ball on my desk doesn't work very well for that. So, but because the offer for the property is contingent upon the city council approving it, that's where we're at with this whole process. I would hope, and I didn't get the opportunity to go through the buildings. I know that my staff did, and I would hope that we could save any of the rustic qualities of that property, because I think that's what's really attractive of it is that the rock wall, the rock fireplace and everything. We believe that, I mean, if you look at the sunken gardens at Cahoon Park as well too, is that those are very nice areas for weddings and for all those different types of events. And that, I think that's what our, I wish I had better answers for all of it, but that's me walking around and tap dancing all the way around that without saying, we hope that we can salvage pieces of the property, is what we would hope. But without a full review of that, we're not sure. We just know that there was the ability to look at this property at this time.
Oh, thank you. I understand that it's, yes. So that leads me to the appraisal. Does the appraisal talk about the integrity of the buildings and any of those needs, or was it basically just as a big complex?
There were two values within the appraisal. The lower value was if it was not being utilized as a commercial business today.
Okay.
What this value here on the market value. So there were two numbers within that document, and we believe that this number here is the one that met the conditions of what this property is. So this property is currently in use as a commercial venture, cozy cottages. And so we're actually taking that out of the marketplace, and so that's how we had decided or determined this market value for that property, rather than if it was a property that had been closed already, didn't have, then the structures would have had a different value. And so that's how we, hopefully I explained that well. Did I, Mr. Patterson? Yeah. All right, so that's my layman terms of how to explain the difference
Gotcha.
between those pricing.
Well, since you're dealing with my layman understanding, that was okay. Okay, so then, this is not specifically to you, but maybe more to the council members here, is we had quite a discussion at the last city council meeting about utilizing city property and to a situation that puts us in competition with the private sector. So I'd kind of like to ask what the difference is with this, because as you mentioned, there's a need for this housing, but are we going to have the same discussion that it is competitive with the private sector?
Madam Chair, Legal Committee, and I'll pile onto that one
Sure.
for a second as well too, because you know there is no way to remain out of competition with private business. No matter what service we provide, there is somebody that provides an equal service. What we have the ability to do is to focus on what we want that service to provide. So one of the things that we were doing with the property division, that's why I'm going to enjoy this conversation. I apologize for taking your time for it, but we have over 300 parcels of property that we've acquired over time, whether it be through the Clean and Safe program, with liens on the property and everything. We have about 120 to 140 properties that have very good value within the neighborhoods, that if we can get a house back on that property, it will help raise the value of the neighborhood. It will help raise the value around in the neighborhoods. But I will tell you, for a private industry, sometimes that doesn't make sense when you have to talk about the connection to the system. You have to talk about all the improvements that have to go to the sidewalk and everything else. The city gets the ability to look at things a little bit differently, and so we're able to focus on that. So, you know, and we had that conversation. I think the city council has directed me accordingly that we need to find a way in order to help our healthcare system as well too. So if we can take out some of those hurdles within the healthcare, it was all because of the COVID response and everything else. That's when that directive came out. So when we look at that, if we're having trouble holding on to employees for the healthcare, which we have nothing involved in, or even employees for the school system, I guess our goal would be to try to get our police and fire employees into neighborhoods that we can help change it from the inside out. But all those other special classes become a very important part. So if we can take some of those hurdles that are hard for the private industry to overcome and make it a little bit easier, then we do that all the time through economic development. I mean, I hate the word incentives, because that just means you know, we're giving something away. It's really trying to remove those obstacles that are going to cause problems with that. And it goes through the grants that we provide. It goes through all of those different things. So that won't stop some of the individuals from saying that we're competing with private industry, but we're not opening up properties for just everybody. I mean, we have a big, healthy, affordable housing process as well too, and we could say that affordable housing is still also competing with it. Us giving property away to Habitat for Humanity is competing against, because we've taken away those obstacles that we can help get a property on there. I know you're wincing a little bit at me for that, but I wanted to make sure I gave that whole broad point. The idea is that I don't think we ever get away from competing with business. You know, we don't need to own a zoo. We don't need to own an air center. We don't need to own all that stuff. The idea is to remove the obstacles that makes the economy flow a little bit better. And so our goal would be to strengthen the private side, not weaken it from our involvement, because I think we're all better together than we are apart. So roundabout.
I got it, though. Thank
All right,
you.
thank
I
you.
appreciate you taking the time with that. Any further questions or comments?
Madam Chair, just one thing I will say concerning medical field and different things like that, and police force. There are many cities across the nation that do this exact thing. As a matter of fact, there are cities and towns within New Mexico that do the same as well. Our closest neighbor just south of us does this with medical students, and so it's worth looking into in the least.
Thank you, Counselor Perry.
Madam
I don't
Chair?
believe we've had a motion yet, or do you have?
We don't have a motion yet, but and that other concern though about us entering into becoming competitive with our other property owners is we're not purchasing this I mean, we may be, in a side note, becoming competitive with some other rental or landlords, but we're not purchasing this with the aspect of long-term using it as landlord. We're going to incorporate it into our zoo.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with that too. Thank you. All right. Any further comments? Maybe we should get a motion before we do. Do I have a motion?
Madam Chair,
Thank you, Councilor Foster.
I'd like to make a motion to put on full City Council to consider recommending to the City Council approval of a real estate purchase and sale agreement with Britt Bourquet for the purchase by the city of real property located at 1101 North Atkinson for the sum amount of $415,000. The parcel is approximately 1.24 acres.
Thank you. Do I have a second? I'll second the motion.
Madam Chair, if you are interested in seconding, that would help with me being on the phone.
Thank you. Doesn't really matter to me. Okay, I have another question. I forgot about. I know we have to go through a longer process to sell property, but to purchase it, this is a one-time thing, and this is what we need.
Yeah, so the statute that you're thinking of when we sell property is specific, passing an ordinance and that whole song and dance, it's only for when we sell.
Right.
We're not required to go through the same process when we buy real estate.
That's what I was asking. I thought that was true, but okay, I appreciate that. Any further questions? Okay, all those in favor of recommending approval to full council on the regular February council agenda of the real estate purchase and sale agreement between the city and the owners of Cozy Cowboy Cottage, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously.
No.
Thank you. I didn't
No.
add.
Madam Chair,
Sorry, I didn't.
He would be a no.
No,
Okay,
didn't say
Counselor
that.
Peterson, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
that's all right. You didn't ask the question. So no.
Didn't I?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all
All
right.
right. All right, I apologize.
3-1, I believe. is
The recommendation is still to send this to council at a vote of 3-1.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I didn't ask the owner if she had anything to say. Did you want to? You need to come up to the microphone. I'm sorry. I should have done that earlier. If you'll give us your name and your address, please.
My name is Britt Burke, and my address is 200 South Kentucky Avenue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I came to Roswell in 2003 because of my kids going to the military institute. And I started this furnished rental business to make a living. And in 2007, I found this property, and I loved it immediately. It was very dilapidated, and but the reason I bought it was because it has a well, and you can irrigate without city water and have beautiful green grounds. So I started renovating the buildings one by one to put tenants in them because I had to pay for the building. And it was very extensive. The main big stone house, I had to have Patent Construction come out and raise it for $10,000 to put piers under it because it was sagging. We put in a gym from the Seventh-day Adventist Church as the flooring. And I also hired a commercial company to put in all the electric, so everything's been done kind of first class. The sewage was draining into a cesspool by the pond. And so we had sewers put in and filled in the cesspool and corrected that violation. And so 4 of the units became rentable by the amount of infrastructure I put in. Also, it had new metal roofs put on. And the rear unit, we did some renovation, water, electric, underground electric, and washer dryer hookups ready to go, but we just didn't get any further. I know the buildings look dilapidated, but they have the infrastructure. There's 5 working bathrooms, and the furnished units have 3 nurses in them right now, and that it has always worked as far as being very rentable for that reason, and I'm happy to work with the city in any way to keep that rent going. I'd be willing to lease it back for a while to lessen the cost to the city. And so I'm very flexible. I love Roswell. I love that property, and I really would like the zoo to have it. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay. Are we ready to move on? I guess
Let me
so.
just jump forward here. Oh, there it is.
Okay, next we're going to what we have as item 9, which is actually an addendum to the original agenda, but I appreciate you moving it up because I think there's some staff that may have some input on this. I don't know. So this is the consideration on the Roswell sign ordinance specifically, I think, or not. We want to talk in generalities or specifics? Mr. Nebb or Mr. Patterson.
Well, I was just going to say, I was requested to give a short talk on the First
Okay.
Amendment, so I will just breeze
Let's
through that
do
real
that.
quick so we can get on to other things. So I will try and tell you a little bit about this because the First Amendment does apply to signs. Okay, so if you look, I was a lawyer, I always try to go back to the original language. It says, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. Well, this isn't Congress, of course, but it does apply to us through the 14th Amendment, which was enacted after the Civil War to apply the Bill of Rights effectively to the states. The way that the Supreme Court has crafted First Amendment jurisprudence is basically the assumption is that everything is protected, and then they will carve out a few narrow exceptions of what's called unprotected speech. And you can kind of see a list of them there. Obscenity, fighting words, defamation, child pornography, perjury, incitement to imminent lawless action. So that's a real tight one. Solicitation to commit crime. So true threats. These are the things that the government can just come in and we can regulate. We can say, no, you cannot do this. But they're very narrow exceptions. So other than that, it's basically open season in terms of what is protected speech. And a few examples of things that are protected that some people don't like sometimes: profanity, vulgarity, hate speech, violence, insults. These are all things that the government is not able to come in and say, we're not going to allow you to talk that way or say things about that. We cannot regulate those on the basis of that. There is a middle ground. This is the one exception, is commercial speech. It's kind of a weird in-between. They have basically said commercial speech, which is just about buying and selling stuff, that's not the same interest as when we're talking about politics and art and society and all the valuable things of speech in our society. Commercial speech, a little less so. And so there's greater flexibility to regulate all types of commercial speech versus all those other types of protected speech. And when we say speech, we do not just mean literally me talking or you talking. It applies to every kind of expressive behavior, whether it's books, movies, dancing, paintings, anything where you're expressing yourself. That's speech, and including conduct that is speech. Again, like dancing, but you can regulate conduct to the extent that you're just regulating the conduct separate from the speech. And the famous case on this one is someone's burning their draft card against the Vietnam War, and you can prohibit them from burning their draft card, not because they hate the Vietnam War, but because they're interfering with the draft program. So in particular, the things that make regulations of speech unconstitutional are regulations that affect or discriminate between types of speech on the basis of their content or on the basis of the viewpoint expressed in the speech. So content would be a law that applies to particular speech because of the topic discussed or the idea or message expressed, whereas viewpoint is based on specific motivating ideology or the opinion or perspective of the speaker. I mean, it's pretty straightforward there. Now, on the other hand, it is constitutional to regulate the time, place, and manner of speech because that's content neutral. You're not saying you can say this, but you can't say that. You're applying to all types of speech. You can speak at these times or in these places. So, for example, if you want to go do some, have a demonstration in the park, we couldn't prohibit that, but we could say you can do it between these hours, and you have to, get a permit first. But we couldn't say yes to demonstrations about this and no to demonstrations about that. That would be content or viewpoint discrimination. Signs, as I said, are speech. And so here's a couple cases from the Supreme Court that just are waxing lyrically about how great signs are. Outdoor signs and symbols are a venerable medium for expressing political, social, and commercial ideas. From the poster or broadside to the billboard, outdoor signs have placed a prominent role throughout American history, rallying support for politics and social causes. So that's just one example. Sign ordinances that distinguish on the basis of ideological versus political versus other types of subject matters are on their face content discriminating ordinances. So if you have an ordinance that says you can have ideological signs only on these times or only in these places, or you can't have ideological signs, or you can only keep them up for a certain amount of time, or things like that, you're now treating ideological signs or political signs or whatever it is with special treatment, and now you're content discriminating. And of course, it would be even worse if you were to say signs in favor of this candidate are okay and signs against that candidate are bad. That would be viewpoint discrimination, even more so than content discrimination. On the other hand, signs regulating size, shape, manner, location are constitutional. Those are time, place, and manner restrictions. So, if you want to say you can't put them in the sight triangle because it blocks drivers as they're trying to turn, that makes perfect sense, and it's not on the basis of content or viewpoint. It's saying every sign that you want to put, no matter what it's about, if it's in that spot, it's interfering with traffic, we can't have it. Aesthetics, decorum, offensiveness of the sign are not enough to justify a content or viewpoint regulation, with the exception of commercial speech. Because I remember I told you guys that commercial speech is a little bit different. And in fact, that decision, I was just talking about the Metro Media Inc. versus City of San Diego, they had a billboard ordinance, and the billboard ordinance was regulating billboards based on aesthetic concepts. And what the Supreme Court said was, they went through a whole analysis and they said, this is fine with regard to commercial speech. We get it. You can regulate commercial billboards on the basis of aesthetics, But then the Supreme Court said, but this billboard ordinance does not distinguish, it's not specific to commercial speech, it's all billboards. And they struck it down on that basis. because you cannot say aesthetics do not trump the right of the people to put up a political billboard or anything like that. Lastly, I will note that pursuant to another Supreme Court case, it is permissible to prohibit all private signs on public property. So you can say no signs at all on public property, not on private property. But you can't go in and say, we'll have signs of this topic and not have signs of that topic, because now we're back into content and viewpoint discrimination. So that's all I have to say.
And Madam Chair, and I'll take it from this point, because now we're gonna bring it into the broad issue, and I just want to give you a little bit of background as to why I wanted to make sure we had this conversation on the sign ordinance. So last year, as we were preparing for the political season, we found that the sign ordinance that we had, there were exceptions within the rules, so staff was challenged with how to enforce. And one of the conversations that I had with City Council at that time was that the historical downtown has very wide rights of way. And so the sidewalks are up into the yards almost 10 to 15 feet. So we have the tendency, people that live in that area have a tendency to put their signs on our property on the other side of the sidewalk closer to the road, which confuses the issue. And so we allow for some to put the signs out there, but we would allow for others to not. I know that, and I know there's intersections down to the south, to the north. The one I will talk about because I drive by it often enough is Washington and College. That there is a corner there that people love to put their sign there because of the amount of traffic that goes by it. And because we were going into the political season, because our staff, and there was actually, I think it was Cielo Grande, there were certain paths of park property out there we would allow a sign, but we would not allow a sign at other park property as well. So because it was confusing, and because of the emotion that is generated out of a political season, we erred on the other side and we said we're going to keep it even for everybody rather than to begin enforcing, because I'll tell you, the closer to the election it gets, the more, I don't know how these signs do it, but they grow legs and they get closer and closer to the traffic. They get closer and closer to the people. And so, somebody mows their grass, it gets closer, and then it just keeps moving because everybody is interested in making sure their candidate get there. Back at almost a year ago, I implemented an administrative directive for staff so that I could kind of keep a balance to get through that last year's election cycle. We do not have an election cycle this year, but at that point in time, I had recommended some potential changes to the sign ordinance. I'm here to tell you that I am comfortable with the sign ordinance as it is written, but I want to make sure that we have the conversation with the staff to make sure that there is no signage placed on public right-of-way at all during all the election cycles. And so that all these signs end up onto private property, which is what that last little comment about permissible to prohibit signs. Our current sign ordinance says do not use city property for this purpose. The challenge is that depending on what some of the conditions are within some of our neighborhoods and the tendency that these signs do grow legs and they walk, I just want to make sure that my staff does not get stuck with this, we did it here, but we didn't do it here. The intent is to enforce a sign ordinance completely the way it is. I know Ms. Call gets a lot of these conversations when we're trying to educate our political individuals that are running for office and everything, but I don't want to have my staff put into a predicament where it's this way for this one, but not this way for the other. The sign ordinance, and I know there was a couple of you that were very active in recreating the sign ordinance. I think you took a lot of work in there. I am comfortable at this point in time with where the sign ordinance is at, but I want to make sure that my staff has that full understanding, because the individuals, those exceptions to the rules that have been able to sneak through one way or another, we will be enforcing equally across the board. So I wanted to give this opportunity to you because I don't like to take those administrative directives, and in my mind it was just temporary in order to get through that cycle of time so that staff understood what their responsibilities were and then the candidates understood what theirs were. So I lay that on the table for you, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you.
Madam
I-
Chair?
Pardon me?
Well, I have a
Oh.
question.
Go right ahead. I'll wait.
Well, I have define the difference between easement and right-of-way. Because I think that's where I'm getting it. Are you saying that downtown at the historic district, from the sidewalk to the street, before you hit the street, it's public property?
That is right-of-way, not easement.
So
There-
it's public
there-
property.
It is public property.
So
The
we
air-
don't, so if you own the house there, you don't have to mow that because that's city property.
No, the city code, the state statute requires the contiguous property owner to maintain that property. It is in statute, it is in city code, it is property owned by the city. The only difference is that you're not paying taxes on that property. It's tax-free property in the parkway.
Okay, so I've had this discussion with people. I own pecan trees that are between my sidewalk and the street.
And I would say you actually don't.
Okay, so if someone's climbing up in there and they fall off, they're gonna sue the city, they're not gonna sue me?
I would say, and we could look into that farther, statutorily, and the city code puts the liability on both entities.
Well,
At
because
this point in
as
time.
I had someone up in the tree and I told him to get down or I'm calling the cops, he said, well, it's not your tree, it's the city's tree.
But I believe that our code, and we could go into greater detail on that since we're talking about signs, but but it is that the trees in the right of way, a property owner is not allowed to plant trees in the right of way without the city's permission, even though it happens. According to the code, that is city property. And we have always taken the point where if a tree has a problem, and this was our sidewalk conversation, the property owner is responsible to maintain the sidewalk, but the city has taken on the responsibility that if the tree is causing the problem with the sidewalk, we'll remove the tree. And I won't get you any better answer because I know exactly what you're saying, but that property is city right-of-way from sidewalk to sidewalk in almost every general location. And that is
Cool. So-
right-of-way, not easement.
Those trees need to be trimmed, so I just need to let the city know?
You can let the city know on that, and I will tell you that there's a city code that says that we can let the homeowner know that they need to trim them as well. I think in most of the cases is that the city they've actually come out and helped trim. Now, the challenge always becomes, our people don't trim them like a homeowner would trim them. We're not as bad as the utility companies where we kind of top them, but I think that's the hard part of that area, Counselor, and is that is kind of, for lack of the proper term, it's common law property that the contiguous property owner and the city have certain rights and responsibilities to.
Well, and it's interesting to me because when I look up on the actual county property owners list, that portion of it is listed under my name. So how am I not being taxed on it?
It really depends on how those parcels are laid out, because in some cases, I would say that there may be property out there that is an easement. But the right-of-ways, I guess I don't ever trust those records completely. We can look at that, I mean, at least in the case-by-case issue, but in most of the layout, if you're looking at the historical downtown, we are from the outside edge of the sidewalk all the way across to the outside of the edge of the sidewalk is city right-of-way. And so all that parkway in there is designated as city right-of-way. The homeowner or the property owner that is there, that parcel is up on the other side of the sidewalk. Other than pulling up all the specifics, I can't get into it any deeper than that, but we're happy to look at that. Just note that the statute grants us the ability to do what we're doing, and the city code, it reflects, because it's old language in the statute.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you.
So then I guess it does get to that point because when we're starting about putting out signs, when the property owner is having to take care of it, they feel it's theirs, and so it gets to that point where I think that we're gonna, I mean,
I'd agree, Counselor and Madam Chair. It's what we want to make sure is that we have a clear standard so that everybody behaves the same way. In our minds, to a certain extent, and you know, we had the questions on the park right next to the adult center because individuals started putting signs within that right of way. It's not really the park, but it's the right of way that surrounds that area. We did not take exception the last year because we allow some signs, or we had in the past out near Cielo Grande, where there was nobody living on either side and there was no problem out there, is what I'm assuming, because nobody complained.
Yeah.
The problem is that it's very hard to distinguish between right-of-way that's out that far or right-of-way that's downtown and all of that. So we need to make sure that we're standard. Our biggest concern, and Bill is here as well if you want to ask him any questions as far as how to try to enforce this, the only thing that we really take exception to, and what we did all last year, was that sight triangle to make sure that anything that is placed on our right-of-way is not creating another health hazard or a safety hazard of any other type. We believe that it's proper for everybody to have their opportunity to speak their mind, but we want it equal for everybody. We don't want to pick and choose and for it to go one way or another. And I'll tell you, some of the individuals that I talked to last year, they liked the exceptions to the rule for their benefit, but when it was the exceptions to the rules went to the others, then it was a problem. And so I'm trying to keep it to a standardized process so that staff can understand. So as we change out employees, they enforce it the same way every time.
Good point.
And my challenge as well too is with real estate signs. We want that house sold. We want that house back on the market. We want that house there. But if the sign is on the parkway, then it's illegally placed.
That's right.
And I think that's the big challenge. Not a good answer for that. I guess for this discussion, if you would like us to go in and look at any adjustments to the sign ordinance, we're happy to help do that. I'm just trying to get my administrative directive responded to and removed from this because we don't have anything in the next 12 months that's going to get in the way.
Of
Well,
that particular thing.
yeah. Well,
Let-
and that's, sorry.
Go ahead, continue.
And that's one of the things that I mean, I don't agree with placement on in parks, placement on city-owned property, even if, but the right-of-way portion of it is one of those,
Right.
the hard issues, because if it's contiguous to a homeowner, I always, you know, publicly, I always ask every single homeowner that I put a sign up in. And I know not everybody does, because I've found many that didn't know who the person was that they were advertising for. But to me, even if they're taking care of it, that's their land. But I guess that's.
But, you know, and I believe that there's room within the statutory requirements, and we can always adjust our city code as long as it's not in conflict. There's a lot of different ways that we can look at this, but we have to be able to identify it completely in order to get it correct way. You know, we have in our current sign ordinance, we have the responsibility to remove election signs after 30 days, but as
According to
Mr.
this, yeah.
Patterson's saying,
We
we
can't.
don't really have that ability to do that unless it's on our property. I think we have every right to remove everything off of our property, which is right of way. There is a difference between easement and right of way, and I think we'll need to identify that further as well too, for proper enforcement.
Thank you. I don't want to, I mean, I didn't intend to spend an awful lot of time today on this. I know you wanted a yes or no answer, and you aren't going to get it from this group. I'm just wondering if the entire sign ordinance maybe needs to be looked at and updated. I wonder, since Mr. Bartlett's here, can I just ask very quickly, how hard is it to enforce keeping any signs off of public right-of-way? I mean, that's got to be a 12-member full-time job.
I try not to work in the gray area ever, Counselor, so.
I know,
or
but-
Madam Chairwoman, I'm sorry.
It's all right.
It's black and white for us. If
Sure.
City Council decides to go with the sign ordinance as is, it's not difficult. You can either have them on city right-of-way, or you can't. And so as far as enforcement, it's very enforceable. It will be a learning curve for, in years past, we've kind of, like we did this year, we've kind of allowed that, providing it wasn't a line of sight obstruction.
Right, yeah.
But, I think if the city council decides to go with the sign ordinance written as is, and we do our due diligence, and we put the message out there on Facebook or whatever, Roswell Daily Record, I don't think it's going to be a problem to enforce. 9 times out of 10, the people that are placing those signs out there are really good to work with. So in the past, if we've had any problems, it usually is a telephone call and solved.
Good, okay. And may I ask also, does that include signage on poles, electrical poles, or city street signs?
The city ordinance prevents any kind of signage, garage sale signs, internet signs, anything being on poles, stop signs, and in fact, any city right away at all.
It covers it all. I'm sorry, I haven't read it recently, so I don't know. Again, I'm just curious if the committee wants to look at this a little further, and not take the time now, because that's not what the intent of this was, but.
Madam Chair, and I'll help with that as well,
Please.
too, because the real reason I wanted to get this on there is that we intend to enforce the ordinance as it is written today. We wanted to caution you on the challenges that will come out of us enforcing that ordinance, and so that you are prepared for anything that comes behind this as well, too. But in my mind, unless you decide to change the ordinance, and right now, we're not bringing any kind of adjustments to the ordinance. I think it is really more for me is that I am going to remove that administrative directive off of my staff, so that Mr. Bartlett can make sure that his staff is understanding of how we're going to enforce this. We do have time. So if you guys wanted to think about it, you want to bring it back, all you have to do is speak with Mr. Parker. We're happy to make any type of amendment to it. We're happy to help you with any of the research to get there. But I think my main thing is that I have an administrative directive out there that's been almost a year in length, and I'm really uncomfortable with that because I'm in violation of what the ordinance, how it is written, and so I want to fix that.
Sure.
And so we will remove that as of tonight. If we want to look at some options to that, and I know Mr. Bartlett would be happy to share the ideas of what the staff would have, what they're running into in the field as well too.
Great.
So there's really no action that I need unless you're going to say we're going to move it forward to the city council to maintain that administrative directive. I'm recommending not.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it from all three of you. Does any counselor have any question or problem with that? Yes, Counselor Peterson?
Well, I have a concern with the, signs on the public, on the public property right in front of a house. I believe that a person should be able to put a sign there, as long as it's not blocking anything. That's their property. The homeowners, most of them maintain them. I think they should be allowed to put a sign there. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Perry, any discussion?
Oh, where's a good newspaper cartoonist when you need them?
Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
I had to say it. I'm sorry. I hear both sides of this. I do, but I think that you said something that may bring some wisdom back into this, Counselor Stubbs, is that maybe it is time for us to look at this and see if there's some things that did not work. I think that's only fair to our constituents. Oftentimes we make laws or whatever we may be doing that at the time seems like this is the best way to do it, but in the midst of it we see, okay, this didn't work as well as it should have. I think that we do owe it to our constituents to, from time to time, look at things as things evolve in the city, as people as things work, and sometimes it doesn't work. So I think there's some wisdom in that, and I would be very amenable to doing that. I think that would help Councilor Peterson as well. For this committee, he'll be able to be part of that process and see with the new set of eyes that wasn't part of the original consideration of this ordinance. And maybe that's the best route to go with this time. That's just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from the committee? So maybe we'll just do that now.
Yeah, well, what staff will do is we'll put together some pieces that will help this conversation
Perfect.
on for
Perfect.
later. I would love to show some pictures, but the differences between easements and rights-of-way, city property and all that. So we'll put some of those pieces together. I don't see us bringing it back to you next month. It'll probably be the month after that, if at the earliest. So thank you for the discussion on
Thank
this.
you.
I know it's
We
challenging, and,
It is.
and we'll do it wrong every time.
Of course.
So,
That's why we keep meeting.
yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. So we'll think about doing a full-blown analysis of that ordinance sometime soon. Okay, thank you all very much. Let's move on to item 4, which is surplus property policy. Mr. Glenn?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. I was tasked with redoing our surplus property policy. This water maintenance kind of takes care of the surplus property items through the warehouse. That's how it got put over on me. We put a committee together of Deanna Garcia, Becky Hicks, Monica was on it when she was still employed with us, Miguel from the warehouse. I believe that we've got a decent policy here that covers everything.
Okay.
We want to go through it real quick.
Sure.
It establishes a documented guidance and authority to dispose of the surplus property. It actually tells us how we do it. There's a number of different state laws and everything that's involved here. We wanted to make sure that it's a very transparent and accountable process. If anybody ever questions how or why, we want to have the paperwork and everything right there to show them. This is how it happened. One of the important things in this policy is it establishes those methods of disposal. We can transfer between departments. We do that all the time. Just a matter of a little paperwork. We can do trade-ins now. Parker worked very hard on this section because of the vagueness in state law and stuff on this. So he spent some time working on that one. Everything else was easy. The sale of property through auction, that's typically how you get rid of surplus property. That's the normal process. We also have the sale of property through an online auction. This is a new option to us. We're working with a place called governmentdeals.com, and it's just for government agencies to sell their property online. Then we don't have to have the actual auction and stuff. They do an online auction. We can set reserves on it. We can put any kind of rules on that particular item at any time. It also talks about cannibalizing stuff. We do that a lot, especially out in sanitation, where they take parts off one truck and put them on the other. Water maintenance, we do it with pumps and that. We never throw something away because we can always have something come good out of it. Transferring to another public agency, we do that. In fact, I think tonight you guys are going to discuss that with an item with the county. And then there's some items that just don't have a value. And this has a process on how we can actually just throw something away. The other important parts of this is that it sets on how and when city officials and employees are allowed to bid on items. If you have an auction item, it's pretty easy, especially with the online auction. You can, when they're at home, they can go out and bid on the auction item. But it also says that they're not allowed to do it on city time, so they can't do it at work. It discusses the unauthorized personal scrapping and recycling or disposal of trash or junk. That was an interesting one that I went out and did some research on. People would throw something away, and then at the end of the shift, go out and pull it out of the garbage and take it home. So it talks about that you're not allowed to do things like that. You can't recycle things that city owns. All that stuff has to go through the process.
Okay.
If it's recyclable, the city recycles it, not individual. And then it establishes the disciplinary actions for violation of the policy. I would take any questions.
Thank you. Appreciate your detailed report. Are there any questions at this point for Mr. Glenn? No? Yes? Go ahead.
So when is a city official, elected official, not on city time?
Oh.
Just kidding. I mean, I thought I was 24/7, so I didn't
Yeah.
think it means I can't bet on anything, right?
Well, every so often we've had to ask Parker for definitions, and
yeah, that's
it's
what
a little
I want that
crazy.
definition
Yeah.
in there, Parker. When am I not on time? Sorry.
Well, I'm sure that's true for an awful lot of us in the room as well, not just counselors. Yes, Counselor Peterson.
I had a question.
Sure.
On the internet auction sales.
Yes.
Are you going to be able to sell it through any internet auction, or
We
are
would.
you?
We have it set up through this governmentdeals.com right now because of the way they have, the ability they have to take the money in and meet all the requirements of the state.
Because I think that that the city should open that up to the public, to the different internet auction sites. There's a lot of different internet auction sites, and I think you might be able to get a competitive bid instead of just going through this government deals.
It's just hard to make that, to have them be in compliance with state laws and the finance department.
Yeah,
But we can definitely look into that.
yeah.
Yes.
In the past, the city auctioned all their stuff off. They used an auction house. Once a year they would gather up everything and sell it. I don't have no problem with that, and selling it that way.
And what do we use that site for? A lot of it is some of the stuff that comes out of the police department, that's asset seizures and stuff like that. And putting it out on the auction, you can oftentimes get more money out of it because there's a wider group of people,
More people.
that have the ability to go onto that site.
Yeah.
Chairperson.
Yes, I was.
I was just going to
Oh, yeah,
say
and-
that governmentdeals.com is anybody can register and buy from that. It's not.
Yes.
It says government deals, but it's open to the public.
Right.
There are
No.
several different sites too that are
Yeah.
like that do work with the New Mexico code. So I'm familiar with, but government deals is open to the public.
I'm familiar with that one. I was just concerned with there can be if you open it up in that area, bid it out, I think would be better. I think you might get a better deal with it.
And we can definitely look into that
Okay.
and see what, we've been working with a lot of the other municipalities in the state to find out the best way to do this. We'll see how other places are doing it.
Because some internet auction sites, a lot of them, they'll donate money back to the community, or they'll donate money back to the different charities. So that's something to think about.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have comments? I don't think this specifically mentions an online.
I think it just
Source.
says that it can be done by internet auction.
That's what I'm thinking. And it's not at all specific.
No.
Okay. which is probably
We
the way
tried to be
do it.
very vague, yet cover everything.
Sure. Okay. So could I just ask, is this replacing a policy, or has there not been something in writing before?
Actually, what happened is, Mr. Sanchez came and said, hey, you're in charge of this now.
Ah.
I asked him if there was a policy, and he shrugged his shoulders.
Okay.
I went over to Mr. Nebb's office and said, hey, is there a policy on this? And he goes, no, but I bet you can write one.
Great.
So
Well,
that's,
looks like he was right.
that's how this happened.
Okay. Well, I think it's good to have these things in writing. We realize they also are fluid and they can be changed when necessary, but I like having it in writing. Okay. Any further discussion or questions?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we send to full council to consider recommending approval of the new surplus property policy.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Counselor Peterson seconds. So there's a motion and a second to recommend approval of the surplus property policy to the full council at its February meeting. Are there, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 All right. Those opposed, no. Hearing none, it's unanimously approved to send to full council.
Thank you.
Thank you for your work on it, too. Okay. Oh, yes. the
Speaking of
same.
which,
We're on item number 5, which is authorizing sale of certain surplus property. I think this, Ms. Hicks, is this yours?
No, you're the
No?
one after this.
Oh, sorry.
We have multiple,
Thanks, George. Go ahead.
do we still have Counselor Perry on the line?
Yes, yes. Counselor Perry, you're still there?
I am here. Did we lose someone?
We did. Counselor Peterson has just left at 5:42.
Okay,
So-
I won't be saying a whole lot. I don't feel well right now, but I will stay on since you've lost Counselor Peterson.
Thank you, Counselor Perry, appreciate it. Okay, sorry, this actually comes from the library, if I'm not mistaken. So is that you, Mr. Peters?
I guess so. I don't think Enid is here that I know of. So I'm happy to take this one.
Thank you.
So this is kind of fun because we just passed the policy and we're going to do 2 items that are basically doing the policy. And these could have gone, I think, also through finance, but since we were doing these, and since there are resolutions and we're kind of approving the form of them and how we want to do it to comply with the statutes, I felt like we could do all 3 of these through legal as one kind of package to see how it all would function. So this first one is for surplus property, personal property under the value of $2,500, and that's a relevant number because pursuant to 3-54-2, which is in our municipal code, you have to treat the sale of personal property above and below that differently. So if it's above that, you have to go through a whole process of putting an ad in the newspaper and doing a bunch of stuff. But if it's under this amount, then it only needs to be shown to the governing body that it's under this amount, and then it can be authorized for sale at a public or private auction, and however you know. So basically, the city can go from there and sell it without further notice to the public or anything like that. Although I'm not sure exactly what Enid has in mind for this stuff. There's one of the items is a vehicle, and the other item, and then there's some miscellaneous jewelry. I think some of it has basically no value and maybe just disposed of, but there's at least there's a watch and a ring. And so these items, we're asking that you give us approval. We have attached both a list of the proposed items and then the cost justification. So in compliance with that section, we are showing to the governing body the valuation. It's under $2,500, and we ask for authorization to sell these at a private or public sale pursuant to the section. And going forward, as we do more of these, this is kind of the form that we would propose to do it in.
Thank you very much. I don't remember ever seeing one of these, so that's interesting.
Yep.
Are there any questions or comments, Counselor Foster?
On the $2,500 policy, now, just looking at this, I don't think it happens, but is that per individual item or per cumulative?
No, per item.
Per item, okay.
Per item.
Because I don't think this still will be cumulative, but I just wanted to know.
Per item, right.
Okay.
Because otherwise we could just divide it up into as many different resolutions as we wanted to and play with the price that way. It wouldn't make sense.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments?
I do have one.
Sure, Counselor Foster.
Does Mr. Glenn get caught with all these items? I guess it's to Joe. It's, poor Mr. Glenn's gotten this whole. I mean, I've had this conversation with Joe several times because I do visit these websites and I buy a lot from many of the cities around us. So I do know the websites that they sell them on. And I've always said we need to, just because we get it gone and get money back into our accounts faster than you do just holding stuff and waiting till you have one big auction. So I appreciate this move, but then I do know that you have to have one administrator that's in charge of making sure this property gets listed and gets sold, and somebody, contact person for people to come pick it up.
Yes, Madam Chair, Legal Committee. From this point, the resolution itself, as surplus property is declared, will more than likely fall underneath Finance Committee or the Finance Department's responsibility. So I would say that Ms. Everett, Lupita Everett, within procurement, will help us release the stuff back on the other side. And the whole idea was to do that. Mr. Glenn has done this a couple times on surplus property for the internet and everything else, and so that's why he's done this before, and so that's why he wrote the policy. But I would say that for the release of the property, to make sure legal will be involved, and then of course the finance department for releasing it back out. And the whole idea is to not hold on to it.
Correct.
And I just know that we were involved in selling a fire truck when we first set this up at another location. And we got twice as much for that fire truck than we would have if we would have waited for the on-site auctions.
Well, and the thing about the on-site auction is that we have to have a location. We usually have it out in one of our properties in a field, and if rain happens just between, and some of the stuff doesn't sit well with rain, and so it's just out to the weather, where this time we get it gone as quick as it comes up, and then that we don't have to worry about it. It just makes sense.
That's our intent. So yeah, Mr. Glenn has some other responsibilities that are his primary responsibilities, so we will put that back up onto the finance department. Cool. So Mr. Fuentes is in the back of the room, but he will have to help make sure that happens. So
cool. I just wanted to know that we had a plan for it, and I did.
Once we declare it surplus, it is no longer the item of the department. We will take it in as that whole cell essentially, and get rid of it that way.
Cool.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on authorizing the sale of certain surplus personal property? Hearing none, can I get a motion, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to send to full council, consider a recommendation to City Council the adoption of resolution authorizing the sale of surplus personal property of the city. And
Thank you.
I mean, there's no specifics on it, but yes.
Okay, thank you. Did you say consent or not?
Not consent.
Not?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just.
That's fine.
It's actually resolution 21XX.
I just made the notation myself. It's resolution 21, not 20. Thank you. Any further comments or questions, concerns? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of...
Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, Councilor Perry.
Did you have a second? Did you second it? I didn't hear one.
I probably didn't even ask for one again, did I?
Okay.
No, sir. Would you please second the motion?
I second the motion.
Thank you, Councilor Perry. Okay, the motion's been moved and seconded to send to full council with a recommendation of approval the resolution authorizing sale of surplus property. Any further discussion, questions, or comments? Hearing none, then all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. That'll be on the February council agenda. Thank you all. Now we're going to the resolution authorizing the sale of certain 2003 freight line truck to Chaves County. Freight line
And
truck.
Becky, I have to apologize. You sent me a slide and I did not get it in. I just have, it's basically the same information though.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They have it in the packet. You have a valuation report
Yes,
in your
we
packet.
do. We
Okay.
have it. Thank
Right.
you.
Madam Chair and council members, this is a resolution to sell a 2003 Freightliner truck that has been outfitted with a roll-off equipment, a tarp system that covers the trash that the Chaves County saw that we were going to be auctioning and had approached us to purchase. If you look at the valuation report, this is something that we're attempting to do so that we can have some idea of what we believe the value of a given item is if it's pricier, like if it's a large piece of equipment. So I looked on the internet for similarly outfitted trucks in that year range, and it came up with an average price of $9,900. I do not have an NADA guide value because that costs money to have that subscription, and I just, even when you get one, all you get is what the cab and chassis would have been worth, but not what the truck outfitted with the roll-off and tarp equipment would have been worth. So it doesn't really help us that much. Then we also took the purchase price and divided that by the number of years of age and came up with a price of $6,684. Then we took those two numbers and averaged them together, and that is the lesser of the two. The price divided by age, or the average, is what we would set for the reserve price if we were going to do it as an online auction. So the reserve price would have been $6,684. However, since the Chaves County offered us $2,000, we told them that would be sufficient, assuming that we got it approved.
And just for your information, this is a process that, again, per our state statute, we are required to vet this through DFA. So, and we've done this before, in fact, not selling, but actually just wholesale donating. And in the past, touch wood, we've never had a problem with it. We just fill out the paperwork, provide the resolution approving the deal, and they sign off on it.
Thank you. So, does that mean we're accepting a price over $4,600 or under? Did I say that?
Under.
Okay. Then what it's valued?
Well, typically, in the past, we have donated items to other government agencies.
Oh.
Chaves County was being generous, and when they offered us
Okay.
to actually purchase it.
One of the findings that you're making is that it's in the best interest of the public as part of the
Okay.
resolution. And so that's
Yes.
a little bit of what this is about, the
Okay.
difference.
Okay.
And
Good.
may I add that they're going to be using it to bring trash to our
Facility.
facility, and
okay.
we're going to charge them for that trash. So, I mean, we're going to make money on the trash, although they're going to have to bring it to us if they didn't have this truck or not. But they're still going to be.
Thank you. I didn't think of it that way. Thank you.
And if you look, I also put known deficiencies, and it has quite a few.
I did notice that.
That's
Where
why
did it
we
go?
had made the decision that it was no longer going to stay in our fleet, but instead be auctioned off.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Can I get a motion then, please?
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion to consider recommending to City Council adopting the resolution authorizing the sale of surplus 2003 Freightliner truck to Chaves County for the amount of $2,000 to be placed on the consent agenda.
Okay. I'll second the motion. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of the resolution approving the sale of equipment to Chaves County, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. 3 in favor then. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, one final piece. Is this yours, Parker?
Yeah,
The Open Meetings Act that we approve every year.
Right, I don't have a lot to say about it. It's a form that we approve every year. It's based on an Attorney General recommended form required by the Open Meetings Act to do this, and that's pretty much it.
Fine. There really aren't any changes, I don't
No,
think.
the
from
only change we
the-
made this year was the reference to snail mail. We changed to email because we don't do
Good.
anything by snail mail anymore.
Good. Okay, thank you. I have just a question, Mr. Patterson, on the first page of the resolution, number 2. It says, well, unless otherwise specified, regular meetings shall be held each month on the second Thursday at 6 p.m. And then it says also later on, notice of other regular meetings will have 10 days. That's specific to city council meetings, right? And I just wonder if it should say that.
That's a good point. Yes, and you know, Sharon and I were talking about that the other day, and we were actually talking about just potentially just striking that altogether. But I think we can. It's suffices to say other regular meetings of the city council would probably be a good idea. We could add that.
Yeah, because that's what it's referring to, is just the city council
Yeah.
regular meeting. Okay, thank you. I would appreciate that. Counselor Foster?
Well, and I was just going to say, and regular meetings, so that way special meeting can be called
They
earlier
are-
than that.
They are listed separately in item 4.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
72 hours.
Any other discussion, questions, or comments on the Open Meetings Act resolution for this coming year? Hearing none, could I have a motion, please?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we send to the full city council on the consent agenda, recommending adopting the resolution pursuant to the New Mexico Open Meetings Act,
Including those?
Second.
including the adjustment of on the
Number 2,
number
adding
2, adding
city council.
city council or regular meetings. Yeah.
Okay. Still have your
Second.
second? Okay, Counselor Perry, thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none, this will go to full council if approved. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. All opposed? The motion passes then 3-0 to send the Open Meetings Act resolution to full council. Okay. I don't have anything to report, but thank you all for sitting through this. And anything from any counselors? We have our department reports, which I always appreciate in the packet, so thank you guys for that. Any questions on those? Okay, hearing none. Any further business? Okay, then I adjourn this legal committee meeting at 5:59. Thank you all for being.
Thank you.